The Situation Room was packed, the air heavy with the scent of stale coffee and adrenaline. Banks of monitors glowed against the dim light, each screen alive with grainy feeds from a desert outpost half a world away. Evelyn Marks sat at the table, her legal pad untouched, her pen resting between clenched fingers. Adrian Wells, the CIA director, stood at the head of the room, his expression like stone. "The operation failed," he said bluntly. "2 contractors dead. The target escaped." A collective shiver ran through the room. President Cole's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. It was Thomas Vance who leaned forward first, his voice sharp as a blade. "You assured us he would be contained, Adrian. Now he's out there with knowledge that can bury all of us." Wells's eyes flashed. "We acted under pressure. The leak had to be sealed." "Sealed?" Vance snapped. "You just painted a target on this administration. Do you have any idea what happens if that witness talks?" Evelyn stayed still, but inside her mind raced. The words target and witness confirmed what she already suspected. The government wasn't just hiding corruption. They were hunting their own. President Cole finally broke his silence. His voice was calm, but his knuckles whitened on the table. "I want him found. I don't care what it takes, what lines need crossing. This ends before sunrise." Evelyn lowered her eyes, masking her reaction as she slid her hand into her blazer pocket. Her phone, already recording, captured every word. She knew the risks. If discovered, it would mean treason. But this was leverage, the kind that could topple empires. Clara Hughes shifted in her seat, her smile faint but her eyes razor-sharp. "Mr. President, with respect, we can't contain this forever. Even if the witness is silenced, the whispers are out. The press is circling. The opposition is restless. We need a narrative." Cole shot her a glare. "Then write one." Clara didn't flinch. "Oh, I will. But narratives only work if the characters stay alive long enough to play their parts." The jab landed. For the briefest moment, Wells's face cracked with irritation. Evelyn caught it all. Every fracture, every slip. Her recorder was a silent accomplice, storing away the evidence that one day might save her, or destroy her if it ever surfaced in the wrong hands. The briefing dragged on, voices clashing like steel. Vance accused Wells of incompetence. Wells threatened to expose the reckless demands of the administration. Clara smoothed over the rhetoric with careful words, but Evelyn could see the cracks widening, the house beginning to split against itself. She thought of law school again. Of the professors who had drilled into her that the Constitution was designed to prevent tyranny. And yet here she was, watching tyranny unfold not in secrecy, but in plain sight, under fluorescent lights and official letterhead. When the meeting finally adjourned, Evelyn lingered, pretending to collect her notes. She waited until the others filed out. Cole with his steely calm, Vance muttering curses, Wells barking orders into his phone. Clara was the last to leave, her glance lingering on Evelyn with something between warning and recognition. Alone, Evelyn stopped the recording, slipped the phone back into her pocket, and let out a shaky breath. She had it. Proof that the president himself had ordered the suppression of a witness. Proof that Wells had overseen failed assassinations. Proof that the so-called guardians of democracy were nothing more than criminals in suits. She turned off the light and left the Situation Room, her heart pounding louder than her heels on the marble floor. Back in her office, she locked the door and replayed the audio. Cole's voice was clear, every word damning. "I don't care what it takes, what lines need crossing. This ends before sunrise." Her hands trembled as she pressed pause. With this she could destroy him. With this she could bargain for her own survival. With this she could claim the Oval Office. But power was never that simple. The very act of holding such evidence made her the most dangerous person in Washington, and the most hunted. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel Reed. "I know you were in the Situation Room. Tell me what happened." Evelyn stared at the screen. He was too close, too fast. And if he knew, that meant others might know too. She typed a reply, then deleted it. Trust was a currency she could no longer afford to spend. Across the city, Wells slammed his fist against his desk. His men had reported back. The witness had vanished into the chaos of the desert. No trail. No body. "Find him," Wells growled. "I don't care if it takes every asset we have. If he talks, Washington burns." In the shadows, Thomas Vance smiled to himself. For him, failure was opportunity. Every mistake was another rope to tighten around Evelyn's neck. Another reason to cut her loose when the time was right. That night, Evelyn sat by her window watching rain streak the glass. Washington glimmered beyond, a city that looked beautiful only from far away. Close, it was a snake pit. She clutched the recorder in her hand. The choice weighed heavy. Release it, and the administration would collapse, but she might go down with it. Hold it, and she would live another day, but chained to the corruption she despised. The rain hammered harder, drowning out the silence. Evelyn whispered to herself, as if testing the words for the first time. I'm not here to survive. I'm here to win. The Jefferson Memorial loomed pale in the moonlight, its marble columns casting long shadows across the water. Evelyn Marks waited near the steps, her coat pulled tight against the chill. In her pocket was a flash drive, not the full recording from the Situation Room, but enough to bait the journalist without handing him the guillotine. Daniel Reed appeared from the darkness, his footsteps quick, his eyes restless. He looked more like a man carrying a curse than a reporter chasing glory. You chose the meeting place, he said, stopping a few feet away. That means you trust me. Or you're setting me up. Evelyn's lips curved faintly. In this city, both are possible. He studied her, then gestured impatiently. What do you have? She pulled out the flash drive and held it between two fingers. A fragment. Audio from a classified meeting. The president himself, ordering a witness silenced. Daniel's eyes widened, the hunger of a journalist flashing like fire. If this is real. It's real, she cut in sharply. But it's incomplete. Enough to publish? Maybe. Enough to survive publishing? No. Daniel's jaw tightened. So what's the catch? Evelyn stepped closer, her voice low. You don't use my name. You don't trace the source. And you don't publish until I say the word. You want to burn the White House? You'll do it on my timeline. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. You want me to be your weapon? No, Evelyn replied, her gaze unwavering. I want us to be each other's. You have reach. I have truth. Together we can decide who walks out of this administration alive. For a moment, only the sound of the water filled the silence. Then Daniel reached out and took the drive. His hand brushed hers, cold and tense. If you're playing me, he warned, I'll burn you too. Fair, she said. But remember, Daniel, you're already in the fire. I'm just giving you a map out. The next morning, the White House press corps was restless. Rumors of new leaks rippled through the air like static. Evelyn walked past the cameras with practiced calm, but her mind was racing. She had given Daniel just enough to keep him close, but not enough to destroy her if he turned. Inside her office, Clara Hughes was waiting. She closed the door behind her, arms crossed. You met with Reed, Clara said flatly. Evelyn didn't deny it. You knew already. You always know. Clara studied her, a faint smile playing on her lips. You think you're clever, doling out crumbs while keeping the feast for yourself. But Reed isn't a dog, Evelyn. He's a wolf. And wolves don't stay leashed. Then I'll make sure he's hungry enough to stay close, Evelyn replied. Clara tilted her head, amused. Ambition looks good on you. Just don't forget. I'm keeping my own ledger. And when the time comes, I'll decide whether you're worth saving. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Clara left the room with her usual elegance, leaving behind the faint scent of perfume and menace. Elsewhere, Adrian Wells paced his office, his patience fraying. Reed has something, he barked into the phone. I want him watched. Every move, every call. If he even thinks about publishing, I want his story dead before it breathes. On the other end, his operative hesitated. And if Marks is involved? Wells's silence was answer enough. That evening, Daniel listened to the recording in his apartment, headphones pressed tight. Cole's voice filled his ears. I don't care what it takes, what lines need crossing. This ends before sunrise. The journalist in him thrilled at the scoop of a lifetime. But the man in him felt fear coil around his chest. If he published this raw, they would come for him. They already had. A knock rattled his door. Daniel froze, then crept toward it. A note had been slid underneath. 3 words scrawled in red. Stop. Or die. He shut the blinds, his hands trembling. For the first time in his career, Daniel Reed wondered if the truth was worth his life. The following day, Evelyn stood in the Oval Office with Cole and Vance. The president was calm as ever, but Vance's eyes glinted with suspicion. There are whispers in the press, Vance said smoothly. Dangerous whispers. And they trace back to Reed. His gaze flicked to Evelyn. And perhaps to someone feeding him. Cole's eyes settled on her, sharp and unblinking. If I ever found out someone in this building was colluding with the press, I would make sure their name was erased from history. Evelyn smiled faintly, forcing her pulse to steady. Then let's hope your history books are more accurate than your budget reports. For a brief second, silence held. Then Cole laughed lightly, breaking the tension. But Evelyn knew the suspicion hadn't vanished. It had only deepened. That night, she sat in her apartment with a glass of wine, staring at the city lights. She had taken her first step into open rebellion. Daniel had the recording. Cole was watching her. Vance was circling. Clara was archiving. Wells was hunting. And yet, for the first time, Evelyn felt alive. She whispered into the night, testing the taste of her own ambition. This isn't about surviving anymore. It's about winning. The morning light in the West Wing had turned thin and clinical, slicing across marble and mahogany like a law clerk's ruler. Thomas Vance sat behind a nondescript desk in an unmarked office, the room smelling faintly of old paper and power. He watched the live feeds, Evelyn's appearances, her interviews, Daniel Reed walking the edges of the story, and smiled the kind of small private smile predators keep for themselves. The dossier on Evelyn lay open before him. Surveillance photos from Halcyon's boardroom, the hotel frame that had ruined her public image, the courier log showing an unknown USB changing hands. Someone had been sloppy. Someone on the inside had left a breadcrumb trail. And that breadcrumb trail led straight to a threat Vance had no intention of tolerating. Find out everything about the Jefferson meeting, he told an aide. Who she met. Who knows? Who can be compromised? Move quietly. I don't want this one to bleed into the papers. I want it buried. The aide left. Vance's fingers tapped the desk once, twice. He envisioned the playbook. Isolate, discredit, neutralize. The administration could not survive a vice president who held the trigger in the map. If Evelyn wanted to topple Cole, he would make sure she didn't have the chance. Evelyn's day began with a different kind of pressure. A stream of scheduled interviews, the careful choreography of damage control, and the tight humming knowledge that every eye in Washington suspected her. She moved through the Oval Office like a woman on glass, where one misstep meant the world watching. The ledger and the Halcyon contract slept locked in her safe. The Situation Room recording had been copied, encrypted, and hidden where even proximity sensors would struggle to find it. Her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. You are being watched. Safe room, 1,600 hours. No calls. The words were short and clinical. Someone was orchestrating a warning. Someone wanted to help. Or someone wanted to scare her into a misstep. She chose caution. At 4 in the afternoon, she left the West Wing under the pretense of meetings and drove alone to a dark townhouse closer to the river. A rental she'd taken for reasons she told no one. The hallway smell of lemon cleaner and old books calmed her for a second. She placed her briefcase on a table and removed a small battery-operated jammer. She had more than lawyer's instincts now. She had learned the habits of fugitives. Clara Hughes arrived minutes later, slipping in without knocking. For once Clara's surface charm was gone. She looked tired and real. You called, Clara said. I did, Evelyn replied. You gave me footage. I need to know if you'll come out when the sky falls. Clara poured 2 glasses of cheap red wine and handed one over. I archive, Evelyn. I collect. But I do not jump into the fire for anyone unless there's a net. Unless there's a price. She tapped her thumb against the glass rim. That recording you now own? You gave it to Reed. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Only a fragment. He has to trust me enough to hold it close. He's a blunt instrument. Useful but dangerous. Clara leaned forward, voice low. Vance smells blood. He's moved people already. I have sources, agents who used to run human terrain in Baghdad. They've all been placed on sidelines, but they still answer the old number. If Vance goes kinetic, he'll use assets who don't ask questions. Evelyn's hand went cold around her wine. You think he'll come after me physically? I think he will if he believes you will burn coal and take the presidency, Clara said simply. He'll take you out quietly, and the White House will call it a personal scandal and an unfortunate tragedy. The country will look away. The two women sat in the dimness, the sound of the river distant and indifferent. For the first time, Evelyn tasted what survival cost. A life with no clean hands. Across town, Adrian Wells watched the same flows of information but refracted through a different lens. The CIA's tasking channels lit when Vance requested discreet support. Assets in safe houses, deniable contractors, the sort of operatives who moved through the world like smoke. Wells did not like Vance's reach into operations. Vance wanted deniability. Wells wanted control. Do not touch her, Wells said into a secure line, his voice hard. We keep our house in order. No unsanctioned eliminations. If anyone moves on Marks, I'll know. And whoever moves will pay a price. He understood the danger Evelyn posed. Her leverage could topple administrations. But Wells also understood the chaos of a vice president without restraint. His men would prefer to take the ledger, retrieve the evidence, and neutralize the political variable. Quietly, professionally, legally, to the extent that law could be stretched thin around classified envelopes. Vance, however, wanted finality, and his network moved in ways Wells could not always control. Evelyn and Clara left the safe townhouse together after drafting contingencies. Clara had copies of dossiers and a small stack of flash drives. Evelyn had her own personal set of redundancies, dead drops, secure servers encrypted triple-fold, and a plan for the ledger to go public if she did not walk into the Oval Office within 30 days. A hard deadline, a hard risk. The air tasted metallic. They stepped into the car and as they pulled away, cameras below watched their faces. Vance's surveillance had been tightened. No corner of the city was beyond his reach. He watched them on feeds, zooming in on Clara's smirk and Evelyn's distant eyes. He made a decision then, not to rush an act anyone could trace, but to prepare a moment so small and unquestionable that history would accept it as fate. That night, Evelyn returned to her apartment and found the front door slightly ajar. Adrenaline slammed through her. Every training run, every cautionary drill replayed in her head. She drew her phone, thumbed the camera on and crept inside. The apartment was untouched. A lamp on, a jacket draped over a chair. But on her kitchen table, placed with terrifying politeness, was a single Polaroid. Evelyn walking into halcyon energy, the chairman's hand on her elbow. Beneath it, in handwriting she recognized with a chill, 3 simple words. Nice try, Evelyn. Her breath hitched. The message was not a threat directed at her bodily being. It was a dismantling of her narrative, a reminder that Vance could chase footprints, trace couriers, and expose the seams she had worked so hard to stitch closed. She put the Polaroid into her pocket and looked at herself in the hallway mirror. For a second she saw herself as she had been. Hopeful, idealistic, a lawyer who believed words could enforce morality. Now she saw a strategist, an insurgent within a house of sin, with knives in plain view. Outside, the city hummed ignorant and alive. Inside, a quieter war had drawn its map on her kitchen table. Evelyn slipped the Polaroid into the safe. She turned the key and felt the metal bite. The ledger and the recording were under 3 layers of encryption and a backup in a dead drop she trusted only with a number. She breathed through the tremor in her hands and whispered, not to anyone, but to the weight of her own resolve. You want me gone? She said to the silent room. Finish the job. But when this house burns, don't expect to walk out untouched. The knife in the garden had been unsheathed. Now it was a matter of who would hold it when the rain came. When Daniel Reed's byline hit the homepage at dawn, the internet felt like it had been struck. The headline ran in black, bold type across every screen. Secret assassinations. Audio proves CIA linked 2 White House orders. Below it, Daniel's investigation laid out the evidence. Clips of the Situation Room, budget trails pointing to off-book funds, witness testimony redacted but credible. It was not the whole ledger. It was surgical, devastating, and undeniable. Television anchors leaned in as if the story might bite them. The tone of the city shifted from rumor to reckoning. Protesters gathered at Lafayette Square with handwritten signs. Cable panels scrolled late into the night discussing whether the republic itself had been sold. Even in quiet corners of the Beltway, senators who months before had smiled for photo ops were suddenly calling staffers, seeking briefings, rehearsing statements. Evelyn watched it all unfold from the thin refuge of her Georgetown apartment, TV light painting her face in stark blue. Daniel's piece had done exactly what she intended. It had exposed the core crime without detonating the entire arsenal. The White House scrambled defensively. Cole's press team issued a swift denial, condemning selective leaks and misinformation. Thomas Vance moved like a shadow, issuing counter-narratives, planting doubts about the audio's authenticity, raising questions about chain of custody. The aim was clear: muddy the water until truth looked like opinion. Congress reacted with a different energy. Within 48 hours, the House Intelligence Committee announced an emergency hearing. Subpoenas were readied. Lights in the Capitol burned through the night as staffers prepared documents and witnesses. For the first time in months, committees that usually stalled on procedural bickering found their focus sharpened into a blade. Evelyn was served with summons papers before breakfast. The irony hit her. She, the lawyer who had once crafted immunity clauses, was now the one called to testify in a public chamber that thrummed with the electricity of accountability. Her name, once a byword among insiders, was now spoken on the floor of Congress with the weight of potential prosecution. She could be celebrated as a whistleblower, or crucified as a conspirator. At the hearing, the room was a television set. Bright lights, camera banks, and a sea of faces, reporters, staffers, aides, and the public watching from overflow rooms. Daniel sat in the press gallery, eyes steady. Clara Hughes watched from inside the chamber, her expression folded behind practiced neutrality. Adrian Wells sat with a cluster of dark-suited men, his face stony. Evelyn took the witness chair with the confidence of a courtroom veteran, but the vulnerability of a woman whose fate hung in the balance. The chairman's gavel fell. Evelyn's voice, when she spoke, cut through the noise. "I have sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution," she began, "and that oath requires me to speak when the instruments of state are used to commit unlawful acts. The American people deserve the truth." Her testimony was meticulous. She laid out what she could: the existence of shadow funds, the chain of transactions that funneled money through shell companies, the names of contractors, the directives she had seen. Daniel's audio was played in the committee room. The president's voice, unmistakable, ordering that the threat be stopped. Gasps moved through the chamber like a wave. Republican members bristled. Democrats leaned forward. The footage was a clinical blow. But Evelyn stopped short of revealing everything. She referenced additional classified materials currently held outside the government, and declined to identify sources or locations. When asked about halcyon energy in her meetings, she invoked privilege and political discretion. "I will not politicize the decisions of the American people, nor expose commercially sensitive negotiations on a public record until a secure process is agreed." The phrasing was deliberate, protective, and opaque. Outside, the crowd swelled. Protesters chanted accountability now, while another faction waved signs defending strong leadership. The country seemed to split along a fault line no polling company could measure. Backstage, Vance leaned close to the microphones, slipping a leak to a friendly network. "Evelyn Marks has business ties to Halcyon Energy. Influence peddling? Conflict of interest?" Within an hour, the drumbeat changed. Questions shifted from the CIA's actions to Evelyn's motives. The narrative was bending, perhaps intentionally, toward a more convenient story: a vindictive vice president using classified information for personal gain. Clara watched the narrative thread pulling at the seams and made a choice. She could have stayed silent while Vance's whispers eroded the public's trust in Evelyn's testimony. Instead, she stepped into the corridor and asked a staffer for secure access to a small disk she had archived weeks ago. Footage not shown, documents not yet released. She moved like an archivist, finally deciding which chapter would be read. The next day, Clara released a trove of internal memos and purchase orders to 2 independent oversight groups with impeccable reputations. Her release was surgical. The memos showed explicit links between off-book line items and a chain of approvals that ran through Cole's senior staff and the CIA's desk officers. Where Daniel's article had sewn the first cut, Clara's documents opened it wide, exposing the administrative thread that tied budget language to real operations. When the news cycle caught the new layer, the story changed again. Suddenly, it wasn't just audio and accusations. It was paper, signatures, and documented approvals. Senators who had previously hedged found footing to call for emergency oversight. The White House's denials frayed. Vance, who had tried to control the narrative, found himself on the defensive. But Clara's reveal came with its own cost. Among the documents was a redacted attachment suggesting Evelyn's meetings with Halcyon included language about future concessions. Vance pounced on it like a hawk. He framed it as a quid pro quo, Evelyn's assent in exchange for corporate privileges. The camera lenses hungrily ate the image. Evelyn learned of Clara's leak as she prepared for a second round of questioning. For a moment she felt cornered. The ledger, Halcyon, Daniel's audio, Clara's methodical disclosures, all spiraling into a melee where motive and method were indistinguishable. But then she realized what Clara had done. By exposing administrative proof, Clara had taken the fight from rumor to record. She had also given Evelyn cover, political oxygen, by forcing the inquiry onto institutional practice rather than personal vendetta. Evelyn stood before the committee again, weary but unbowed. "If you want scapegoats," she said quietly, "look at the system, not the symptom. This office has always been cloaked in necessity. It's time we examine necessity itself." The chairman closed his legal pad slowly, the weight of choices heavy in the room. Outside, the nation watched and waited. Inside, the players recalculated. Alliances shifted with the speed of headlines. The House Intelligence Panel voted unanimously to open a full investigation, and calls for a special prosecutor began circulating in the Senate. Late that night, Evelyn sat alone, the glow of the laptop reflecting the ledger's encrypted file on the screen. She'd bared enough to move the system, but withheld enough to keep her bargaining chip. Somewhere, Clara had placed her own bet. Vance had sharpened his knives. Cole watched, wounded and furious. Evelyn closed her eyes and felt the exhaustion land like a stone. Truth had been unbound. The country had seen behind the curtain. But the door had not yet closed. Power, she knew, was not just in revelation. It was in the pause that followed, the silence before the verdict, the confidential negotiation, the next move. She had spoken, the truth had traveled. Now the work that followed would decide whether it rebuilt the country or razed everything to ash. The White House at night was a fortress of light, glowing like a citadel against the black sky. Yet inside its walls the air was heavy with dread. The president's advisors moved like ghosts, whispering, avoiding eye contact. Everyone could feel it. The empire was cracking, and the center no longer held. Evelyn Marks walked the corridor slowly, her heels clicking on marble, her briefcase in hand. Inside it, hidden under layers of paper, lay the recording from the Situation Room, the blood-stained ledger, and the documents tying Cole's administration to the covert assassinations. It was everything. Enough to destroy a presidency. Enough to crown her. The Oval Office door stood open. President Cole was waiting, his silhouette framed by the tall windows. Thomas Vance hovered nearby, his hawk-like eyes glinting in the lamplight. Adrian Wells leaned against the wall, silent, his presence as sharp and dangerous as a loaded weapon. Clara Hughes sat with her notepad closed, watching like a judge, not a servant. Cole's voice was low, measured. "You've dragged us to the brink, Evelyn. The hearings, the leaks, the poison in the press. And yet here we are, still standing. You've made your move. Now tell me, what do you want?" Evelyn set the briefcase on the desk and opened it with deliberate calm. She slid the recorder forward, pressed play. Cole's voice filled the room, unmistakable. "I don't care what it takes, what lines need crossing. This ends before sunrise." The words hung like a noose. Silence pressed against the walls. Vance lunged forward, slamming the recorder off. "This proves nothing. Chain of custody, context, authenticity. Any lawyer would shred this in minutes." Evelyn's eyes cut into him. "I am a lawyer. And I know what this means. It means leverage. It means the committee won't stop. It means the press will feast. And it means you, Mr. President, are one step away from resignation or worse." Cole studied her, his face calm but his fingers gripping the desk. "And if I were to step aside, what then?" You walk in and claim the throne. Evelyn's voice did not waver. If you don't, Congress will tear it from you. I'm offering you a choice. Resign and preserve a legacy, or fight and lose everything. Wells finally spoke, his tone cold steel. And what if we eliminate the problem instead? Accidents happen. Scandals consume. Witnesses vanish. His eyes bored into Evelyn's. You'd be surprised how quickly the country forgets. For the first time, Clara broke her silence. Careful, Adrian. The country may forget, but I don't. And neither does Evelyn. Every word tonight is being recorded. She tapped her notepad. Insurance. Vance's jaw tightened. You treacherous. Enough, Cole snapped. His calm veneer cracked for the first time, anger surging beneath. He looked directly at Evelyn. You think you can seize power with stolen files and half-truths? You think ambition makes you worthy? Evelyn leaned forward across the desk, her voice a whisper that sliced through the room. I don't think I'm worthy, Mr. President. I know I'm inevitable. The silence that followed was thick with history. The fall of leaders often came not with a gunshot, but with a single sentence no one could unhear. Cole exhaled slowly, lowering his gaze to the desk. When he raised it again, his voice was steady, almost weary. Then this is the end of my presidency. Draft the announcement. Effective immediately. Vance stared at him aghast. You can't. I can. Cole cut him off. And I will. Better to step down with dignity than be dragged out in chains. Thomas, your usefulness ends here. Don't test me. Vance's face darkened, but he said nothing more. Wells left without a word, his silence more dangerous than threats. Clara closed her notepad and gave Evelyn the faintest of smiles, one survivor recognizing another. 2 weeks later, the world watched as Raymond Cole announced his resignation, citing health reasons and a need to prioritize family. The nation buzzed, analysts speculated, and the Constitution carried on. On a cold morning soon after, Evelyn Marks placed her hand on the Bible and took the oath of office as the 48th President of the United States. Cameras flashed, crowds cheered or jeered, but all Evelyn heard was the hammering of her own heartbeat. She had climbed through fire and betrayal, wielded secrets as weapons, danced with wolves and serpents. She had won, yet victory felt like ashes. That night, alone in the Oval Office, she poured a glass of bourbon and sat at the resolute desk. The room was quiet, the weight of history pressing down from every portrait on the walls. She unlocked her briefcase, pulled out the ledger and stared at it. The pages still dripped with shadows, covert killings, quashed rebellions, money trails that crossed oceans. She had not destroyed it. She had not released it. She had kept it because power did not live in truth. It lived in secrets. Her reflection stared back from the polished wood of the desk. Once she had believed the law was the highest authority. Now she understood. Law was the mask, but fear was the crown. The door opened slightly. Clara entered without knocking, closing it gently behind her. Congratulations, Madam President, she said softly. Evelyn lifted her glass, meeting Clara's eyes. We both know this isn't an ending. Clara's smile was cool, knowing. Of course not. It's only the beginning. And beginnings are far more dangerous than endings. Evelyn raised her glass in a silent toast, the bourbon burning her throat as she swallowed. Outside, the city slept uneasily, unaware that the woman now sitting in the Oval Office carried both salvation and damnation in the same locked drawer. And for the first time, Evelyn Marks allowed herself to whisper the truth she had buried beneath ambition. I didn't just inherit power. I built it. And I will never let it go.